So welcome everyone. It is now the fourth HVO Search live conversation, and it certainly has been a few very interesting months. I mean, this pandemic has really shaken us, and with health services fighting to keep people alive, to companies figuring out how to pivot their businesses and how to keep their businesses going, and obviously working out how to work from home. And I believe that the lockdown has asked us to think more deeply about what's happening in our own lives and what's happening in the lives of others, and what we want, what we don't want. And I also think that as a result, it has actually made us more sensitive to the issues that touch other human lives. And I spoke to Whitney Hawkings, one of our panelists, the other day, and she said that she feels the extremes of everything right now, both positive and negative. And I identify with that. I mean, the recent news about what's been happening in America. I mean, we know that these instances of, very kind of police brutality against Black African Americans isn't something new. It's been happening before. But I do feel that the reaction towards George Floyd's death is unprecedented. And I do believe that this lockdown has acted as a catalyst for, honest and open conversation amongst white people in particular. And people are willing to discuss and confront these issues, or at least I hope that's what it will achieve. So I know this is not the conversation that we are having today, but I thought it's important to raise that. And I've been thinking about this a lot, especially, as a white person who has grown up in privilege and lived a very privileged life. I don't really know what the right thing to say is right now, but I do know that I do need to do something. And all I can do really is educate myself. And so as a team, and we've got the team in the audience as well, we have been following the Blackout Tuesday, and which gave us kind of a moment to think it through and, how do we begin to look at this issue? But I do feel that one day and one hashtag really isn't enough. So, we know that it's not a US problem. We know that this exists, that racism is overt, it's subtle, it's kind of penetrating all of our lives to the degree that we don't even realize. And the fashion industry isn't an exception. I mean, I know that we live in a biased world. I mean, I studied psychology as a degree, so that was something that we really looked at a lot. And then when I was building an AI-powered chatbot coach, we're talking a lot to AI and machine learning specialists who really pointed out that even when you're creating systems that try to avoid the bias, against gender, against race, that even then, when you're training these machines, they become biased against that. So even the data that we're feeding in there is biased. So how do we tackle that? And something that, we're not going to tackle today, but again, I wanted to talk about that. I mean, at HVO Search, we always looking at ways to avoid bias in how we select our candidates. And my colleague Zia, who is in this conversation today as well, I mean, she in particular has been involved in helping us to design more evidence-based systems to source and select candidates so we can avoid that. But again, it's not enough. But I do feel that, people are becoming more aware, more attuned, and it's time to look proactively into our organizations and to change how we recruit and manage those people on a day-to-day basis. So we deeply believe that diversity is essential to making better business decisions. And part of creating this diversity is having more women in senior leadership positions. So we've been hosting a series of kind of lunches, which we'll call Women Who Win. And this is kind of our small way of uniting brilliant women together. And this is where we bring sort of female CEOs, founders, investors. And so when, in our last conversation, the live chat, when Doug Stevens said that female leaders have been particularly great at dealing with the pandemic, both in terms of the way they handled it, the efficiency, but also the humanity of it, I was really nodding and I was, yes, of course they are. But then at the same time, somebody in the audience pointed out that we were seriously lacking the female panelists. And I was kind of taken aback a little bit by that. And what I realized is that, I didn't even realize that that was the case. And this is how deeply the biases are ingrained in us. So we wanted to address this for this particular conversation. And I have an amazing panel of women today who I'll just introduce in just a moment. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maria Hvorostovsky, and I'm the founder and CEO of HVO Search. We are an executive search firm helping clients within beauty, fashion, luxury, lifestyle, and wellness find senior talent. We do this internationally at a head of level and above, and we do all functions, but we do tend to focus more on sort of commercial, marketing, and digital roles. I mean, the types of clients that we worked with and made placements are Michael Kors, Ralph Lauren, Exotica, Kering, JW Anderson, Quicksilver, amongst others. And we decided to do this series on conversations to engage our network, which is growing. And we wanted to tackle these, the changes in the industry and how they affect us all. And, since we can't be in a physical space together yet, technology is coming to our aid. So I'm feeling very thankful that we are connected by technology today. So I'd love to introduce our speakers, who are all incredibly accomplished, and I feel extremely privileged to talk to you. So we have Caroline Issa, who's the CEO and fashion director of Tank. She's also the editor of the online magazine becauselondon.com. And I'm sure you've seen her on the fashion circuit quite a lot in the fashion weeks. And she's also done amazing collaborations with the likes of Prada, La Mer, LK Bennett. Then we have Lucy Yeomans, who is the creator, founder, and CEO of DREST, which marries luxury, gaming, shopping, creative content, and philanthropy. So an amazing business that she's launching. I mean, previously she launched Porter magazine with Net-a-Porter and was turning around the Harper's Bazaar magazine as well. Then we have Sarah Crook, who is the former CEO of Dundas, and she is a brand builder through and through, having carved out her career at Club 21. And she's also worked with Stella McCartney. She was the CEO of Christopher Kane, and she's recently stepped down from Dundas, but she's still a shareholder and a strategic advisor. So that's really key in this current climate. And then Whitney Hawkings, who is the founder and CEO of FLOWERBX, which is a flower business that's grown into a global flower brand. And she has now presence in 22 countries in Europe. She's just launched US East Coast, and previously she was with Tom Ford at Gucci. So welcome everyone. I will stop talking in just a minute. I know that everyone's keen to hear your questions, but I wanted just to kind of set the scene for what we're doing. It's incredible that we're all interconnected. We live in a world which communication and access to it is really simple. And, there's many channels to talk to clients, friends, potential clients, customers, and at the moment, we're spending a significant amount of time at home. So in some ways, we're a captive audience. And I don't remember a time when founders and CEOs of fashion brands were directly using their emails and their newsletters to communicate with the customers about quite big social and cultural issues. I mean, last night I was just reading an email from Moda Operandi, from Everlane, who actually throughout all of this have been particularly good at communicating, I thought. And, they're addressing the pandemic, they're addressing the systemic racism. And so the number of these kind of conversations and messages have incredibly increased. I mean, we're a live example of that right now, doing a live conversation. And we know that people are on Instagram, live, there's webinars everywhere. So I really do appreciate you all being here today and taking the time to be with us and to share this. So it's clear that the way that brands communicate is changing, but how have the rules have changed? And how do we navigate what we say to our customers? How do we marry up the intangibles of, you know, being on digital and then the, you know, everything that's online with, you know, the senses, and how do we communicate that? So I want to tackle those questions today. So I will stop talking now and would like to pass the baton to our speakers. And so my first question is, and I think I'll address that to you, Caroline. In what way the rules of storytelling and marketing have changed? Like, what are the changes that you're seeing right now?
I think for me, the most interesting and visible change is simply that we're all, as brands, as magazines, as retailers, whatever we are, directly connected to our audiences and getting feedback immediately. Whereas it used to be a very one-way communication system, now it is very much interconnected. And I think brands, content platforms have to react and fold in those kind of audience and community pieces of feedback. I also think what first the pandemic, but also kind of global crises always show is that there are times when as brands and when we're all selling things, we have to sort of step back for a moment and start communicating around why our brands exist, how we're here to serve and work and help and provide edits and resources for our audience and our community and our customers. And I think, you know, when in Europe in March, we all found ourselves at home, I think all of us sort of had to take a step back. And I think the brands then who took it as an opportunity not to like sell necessarily, but to talk about, you know, why they were important these days or why they were helping us to connect with each other these days. I think those brands who still communicated, but in a very sensitive, authentic, and also kind of purpose-led way, are going to be the most successful continually.
Who have you seen that's doing that really well?
I mean, I think Gucci as a large fashion brand has done that extremely well. Ooh, sorry. Careers at home all the time now. And I think, you know, what they've been great at is actually providing a lot of resource for people to fundraise and donate to WHO, you know, systems. But then also, I think, small brands like Alighieri, which is jewelry, you know, they did wonderful things to connect the community. And I think somebody like, you know, Whitney and FLOWERBX, who really, you know, showcased and story told why like actually self-care, flowers, like having beauty in the home and why that is relevant still. Like, I think when everybody sort of pivots to different kinds of storytelling that's very relevant and doesn't feel like it's too pushy, but very, kind of just real and sensitive. I think those are the kinds of brands that will be long lasting and customers will remember.
I totally agree with that. And Whitney, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
Gosh, I mean, Caroline, you just summed it up perfectly. I think one of my shareholders said to me at the very beginning of this, like, people remember how you act right now, like how you treat your, and not that I was ever wanted to act badly, but how you treat your employees, how you treat the world. And it, you know, even though I felt really desperate as an owner of a business and a CEO, you know, how to sell, it also like really resonated with me. Like, I have to, you know, do what's right. Luckily, I work in a product that lends itself and is more relevant now than ever. So selling it wasn't really a problem. But I think the storytelling is key. I think being really transparent with your team, being transparent with your customer is really important. We started sort of 3 times a week donations to the NHS, and the letters I got of flowers, the letters that I got like from NHS workers that were, you know, in tears saying what joy we had brought to them. So I think, yeah, I think that's what's most important. I think the brands that have done it really well are the brands that have, you know, like Uber, who's like, don't ride with us. you know, or Nike who's like, don't do it. I think the brands that took everything they're about and they said, actually, don't do any of this right now, do what's right. I think those brands have really struck me. I think about that all the time. Like all these things you're telling people to do all the time, you're saying, actually, don't take one for the team. Don't do what you do. So those brands have really like moved me a lot throughout this.
Sarah, I see you nodding there. I mean, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the spirit of community has really come to the forefront during this. And I think one of the other great things is the sort of gap between the super brands and the smaller brands has closed. Normally the super brands, you know, they have big marketing budgets, they can do big campaigns, they can place their ads wherever they want. And I think what's been a great opportunity here is that there's a lot of smaller brands that have become highly creative. And really have the opportunity to express themselves. You look at Instagram, it's I think 70% plus up between March and April, you know, so it's obviously been a huge channel for people. So I think authenticity, I think getting the timing right as well. I think we can't look at this pandemic as the same all the way through. There was a real sensitivity at the beginning of how people express themselves. And it's really like, you know, really being in tune with your customer, I think more than ever. I was nodding with Whitney when she talked about brands that don't do it. Nike, I loved, obviously it's more related to the George Floyd, but to come out and say, don't do it, I think it was genius for them. And I think overall the campaigns that have been successful are the ones that have been authentic. It's a real opportunity for brands to show behind the scenes, you know, to express something else. I love what Chanel did. I love their songs at home. They took their ambassadors and everyone's sort of tapping into not just in fashion, because we're sitting there thinking, how relevant is fashion right now to everyone? Okay, if it's not, how can we express ourselves in a different way? Maybe it's cooking, maybe it's beauty, maybe it's just some joy in the day. And I like what Chanel did with that. I really enjoyed it. You know, they took their ambassadors and they did a song a day. And it was a different expression. You'll remember that. Did you go out and buy a handbag? No, but this wasn't the arena for selling product in the way that brands are used to selling product. So I think the element of creativity has been incredible.
I think just to add to that point about Nike, what I thought was really good as well is that Adidas also decided to kind of put their kind of competitive differences aside and also engage in that conversation. So I think that sense of community is really coming across. You've mentioned small brands as well. I mean, do you feel like this is a moment for small brands to really kind of come to the fore and really make something of it? Do you think big brands will always, you know, kind of come out on top?
I mean, I think the industry is becoming more polarized. You know, the big brands are getting bigger, the big groups are becoming more monopolized, you know, and Kering and LVMH are clearly dominating. And I think they started a lot with cause marketing. You know, they're in a position to say, we'll donate 500,000, we'll donate 1 million, you know. So I think, you know, that will always exist for sure. But I think some of the smaller brands, you know, they had to be more creative. They don't have the power. I think one of the things everyone struggled with, how do you create assets in lockdown? You know, you look at Jacquemus, what he did, you know, he just got people like shooting swimsuits in their bathroom. You know, is it relevant? Is it not? But is it fun? Is it humorous? Yes, you kind of remember it. So I think for the smaller brands, you know, being able to use Instagram as a digital platform, if they can create the assets, whether it's creating video content, you know, at Dundas, the boys did Dundas Diaries, you know, so I think it will never close the gap, but it gave an opportunity for younger brands to really sort of be creative and kind of have fun and communicate and express themselves in a different way. So I thought that was there's so many positives to it. And it was nice to see the variety of content across different brands as well.
And Lucy, you're doing something, you know, really different right now. I mean, what's your take on this?
I think I agree wholeheartedly with what everyone has said. And all I would say is that I feel that at the moment, you know, we're all in this situation, you know, as you were saying about Whitney feeling the negatives and the positives. And I think that really unites us as an audience. I thought your opening remarks about George Floyd were, you know, really, really important. And I think that you know, we're all feeling that. I've had talent calling me up who are part of my project who are like, is this right for now? And you know, and I'm saying it's, you know, look, I'm not sure actually. And I think it's really important that we understand, the better we understand the mental and emotional need state of our consumer, the better we can talk to them and storytell them. If you're a great storyteller, you understand your audience. And I think that's something we can all draw from, is how we're feeling personally, and then how do we deal with that. And I think also it has fast tracked some of these emerging trends. You know, this need for an authentic voice is something that we've all been talking a lot about recently, and is incredibly important, particularly in the fashion and luxury space. You know, the way we talk to our customers, to our readers, to lovers of fashion globally has changed so much over the past few years. And I think it's fast tracked the need for that even more, particularly for the younger audiences. They want it to be a conversation, not a sort of lecture about what's good. They want to have discovery. So obviously there's a shift from the physical to the virtual. We all know about the challenges of working from home, socializing at home that we're all dealing with. So I think there are challenges, and there are also ways that we can positively, you know, lift our audience's lives. You know, for me, I look at what Whitney's done with FLOWERBX, and it's, you know, from her NHS campaign, you know, and sorry, that's what I want to say. I don't think it's about campaigns. I think it's about actions from the heart. It's not advertising, it's actions from the heart. And I really see the winners are the brands who are just in tune with the hearts and minds of their audiences and are delivering them what they want. We've found on DREST, because we're a very, very escapist, playful platform, we've had a massive organic lift. We've dialed our marketing back, partly because we had to push our launch back, because we felt that it wasn't appropriate to do our big or singing or dancing fashion supermodels launch at a time when, you know, in March when it was planned. So we've pushed it back to later this summer. And actually we work with our talent. We've just felt intrinsically that it wasn't right, and we had to wait until the timing was right. But we've actually found that because we're in soft launch at the moment, that the need for escapism, I've had letters from people saying, this lets me scratch my fashion itch without having to leave my house. This makes me feel happy. And so we've really found that we want to just promote the escapism and the fun that we know that everyone needs during this time. But as Sarah very rightly says, timing, tone, voice are everything at this moment. And it's the more you understand the person you're talking to, you know, the better conversation you will have.
Actually, that's a really interesting point in terms of understanding who your customer is. I mean, how do you do that within your business? What you know, how do you determine who your customer is? Did you already decide about who you wanted to, I suppose, target, or, you know, or how are you learning about your customer and who you're talking to?
Well, you know, we're a startup, but we're also a concept that hasn't really ever happened before. So a lot of it is discovering as we go. Obviously, we have, you know, we're starting to see incredible data that's informing us. So we're learning about our customer through the data. But I still think at the moment we're doing a number of surveys, finding out, you know, how that, as well as how they're experiencing the product, what they'd like more of, etc. Just getting to know our customers more. And I think that's so important. I mean, we've been surprised by the breadth of our audience. A lot of people, I think, thought gaming, this is, you know, teenagers in their bedrooms. The major group of mobile gamers, for example, are actually women. And a lot of those there's actually a really nice cross section for us between fashion lovers of fashion and lovers of gaming. So it's been interesting for us. We're very much in the kind of exploratory stages, but we're finding, because of the way that we work, we're basically, you know, creating a game out of real product, real talent, real news, real happenings, creating it in this kind of virtual space so that people can come and play. And it's been wonderful for us because, you know, during this time, we actually can create assets. To Sarah's point, we're working with some brands, you know, on the white label opportunities, creating assets from the assets that we have in game. So it's just an interesting time. I think we all have to also be incredibly agile and flexible. You know, I know Whitney and I have had various conversations about how our businesses either need to pivot. We're at the initial stage where we're still, you know, we've barely got a business to pivot, but still we're just listening all the time. And I think the better we listen to the consumer, the better we'll serve her. And actually DREST was born out of listening to what consumers wanted anyway. So that's the position we're in currently.
And to actually a question to Whitney as well. I mean, similarly, you know, you've had to pivot your business now. I mean, how are you figuring out your customer, and how are you know, understanding and analyzing who your customer is to be able to, I guess, to talk to them in the right way?
Yeah, so historically our business has been 50% B2B. So that's events and sort of huge contracts with hotels and restaurants, et cetera, all of which are completely irrelevant and literally went off a cliff from March 1st. So there was half of our business that basically wasn't there. Mercifully, we had a diversified business. You know, we had these three very definite channels. One was B2C, which was the direct to consumer online business. One was events, and one was B2B contracts. So luckily we had the existing B2C business that we just decided to double down on. I mean, the opportunity was there. People were, you know, consuming flowers. They weren't going to their local florists because they were all closed. So they were coming to us for the, you know, the online e-commerce experience. The key now is going to be to, you know, keep talking to those customers to understand. I mean, we have a cohort on the back end, back to using the data, Lucy, that you're getting right now. You know, the COVID customer is going to behave completely differently than our existing previous customer. And, you know, it's probably, it's a completely different customer, but we need to understand that customer, engage with that customer. I mean, up until now, the customer has very much been me in any version of my life, me as an 18-year-old, you know, student, me as a really fabulously wealthy hostess, you know, me, the different you know, people that I could potentially be, someone who really loves beauty, and whether it's buying one bunch every couple of months because it gives me great joy, or whether, you know, it was me in a very wealthy alternative life where I was buying, you know, had my whole house filled with flowers weekly. So I very much understood that customer, and I've talked to her the same way I would talk to these different versions of myself. But now I think understanding this new customer and how we retain them, how we talk to them, who they are, is going to be key sort of in keeping them and engaging with them moving forward.
And you also talked about, you know, different channels of communication. Is there something that works for you particularly well, or you think that this is the one that everybody should be using, or do you try to talk along on all of them? Like what works best for your business?
Well, really amazingly, there was this company called Oceans Billboards. I don't know if you know them, but they basically own every single digital billboard in the UK. They own that huge one in Piccadilly Circus where the Queen was. They own every single billboard. It's called Oceans Outdoor. And they just ran a contest basically where you could apply for these amazing digital ads. They gave them to startups who basically they saw as people who would survive the pandemic and would come out stronger and eventually hopefully advertise with them, you know, in years to come. So they gave us 40 billboards across the UK, that huge one at Westfield they gave us. And it was absolutely incredible. I mean, our site, the traffic on our site was up 1,000% for the whole 2 weeks that those were up. So it was amazing to see what that huge outdoor campaign did to traffic on our site. I think it's super important to use every channel. Flowers luckily lend themselves. I mean, people are not ever angry, I think, at seeing flowers. So luckily it's a medium that lends itself well to being sort of everywhere, because when are you going to get mad that someone's showing you flowers? I think the messaging though is key. So it's not just sell, sell, sell. It's like, here, like lift your spirits, send love, share love with flowers.
I just want to jump in, and I think that's so interesting that outdoor digital was so fantastic for you. I think there is a real danger these days that the platforms that we all love regularly are becoming so monopolistic. And I think that reinforces for the big brands, because the big brands can spend on these very, you know, monopolistic platforms. I think organic reach is shrinking for all of us across platforms that we use every day. And it's definitely becoming more complicated to storytell in ways that are not exorbitantly expensive. But I think owning your audience, you know, beyond these platforms is the most important thing today, and connecting to them at much more human levels, so that you're not just sort of another brand, but actually you mean something to their daily lives. I think that's becoming even more apparently important, as especially like we're all getting killed by the algorithm. So I think, you know, Lucy, it's such a great time. I think right now, you know, her business is in, let's say, fashion and luxury is very innovative. And I think this is the time for real experimentation across lots of different platforms, not getting totally beholden to one, because everyone is going to have to spend a shitload more money on these sort of monopolistic platforms in order to get reach, or even just to access our own audiences. So I think being really experimental, trying new things, trying new platforms, but ultimately trying to connect in a way that your customer, your audience is going to stay with you anywhere that you are, whether that's outside Piccadilly Square or on a, you know, in a pixelated world. But I do think that is something, as we all tell stories, that we're going to have to keep in mind, because it is getting harder and harder for good organic digital reach.
I think, just jumping in again, also to your point, that sense of creating a community is really important. And I think, Sarah, if I think of the Dundas world and the sort of the way that Peter, you know, brings his group of complete ardent Dundas followers together, is really smart. And also for us, we actually found that we fast-tracked a lot of our community features, the ability to follow, to comment, and actually really fast-track those features within the game, so that people could connect with each other in the game and share opinions. And those are all the elements that we press fast-track on, purely to give that sense of community that Caroline referenced.
I think also as well, I mean, obviously your customer is very engaged, you know, it's you know, DREST is something that they can engage in and be creative. And I think that was another interesting thing with a lot of the brands, and, you know, we did it at Dundas as well, you know, with the boys, it's allowed our audience to be creative as well, because, you know, we all know as designers, you know, everyone was on hold, collections were not going to happen for June and July, maybe not even going to happen for September. So I think it was kind of, you know, Peter launched a creative sketching, you know, and everyone contributed their sketches, and it became a competition, and then a charity association. But it actually also enabled the customer to be creative. So instead of always being the receiver, they were like, oh my God, you know, and there was some amazing entrants, you know, of like incredible kind of artistic talent. So I think, you know, making them part of the brand is also, you know, a fantastic opportunity. And, you know, as we were saying earlier, you know, most people are just used to sort of looking at the advertising, kind of being told what to buy, and okay, we're all getting better at engaging and knowing our customer isn't just gonna, you know, do what we tell them anymore. Those days are long gone. But I think, you know, allowing them to be creative and part of your story as well is something that is really interesting for this time. And I think the interesting space in the next 6 months is to see particularly the bigger brands, like how they continue. I mean, we know that COVID's not going away anytime soon, but, you know, going forward, are we going to like really sort of say that this is the start of the future of how we're kind of marketing with our consumers? Hopefully, yes. Because, yeah, you know, going back to just saying, oh, we shot this campaign, here it is, and it's in these magazines, and it's online, and it's on billboards, and, you know, some people can relate to it, some people completely can't, but that's from us to you, and it costs us thousands with the best photographers. And, you know, I think that's what will be really interesting to see, the shift over the next 6-12 months. Where does it go next? You know, is it part and part? Is it half? Do some of the big brands revert back to type? Hopefully not, because I think this has been an incredible learning, particularly on brand and marketing.
I do agree. I think it will be very interesting to see how brands adjust, particularly retail businesses that have, you know, don't have the footfall any longer, or people are afraid of going. And I guess my next question is that, you know, you talked about engaging the customer, you know, doing the drawings and kind of somehow drawing them in, that they're not just an observer, that they actually actively engage with that. I mean, what other things can brands do to engage with the customer without that physical presence? Or, you know, what else are you seeing that's tackling that? And I don't know, I mean, if anyone else wants to kind of take that.
No, I agree absolutely with what Sarah said, that letting your content is obviously an issue. We don't have, people haven't been in studios. We haven't had, our creative department hasn't made our own content, but I think letting your customers create the content is such an easy way to engage. It's also a way to show people like, hey, you can do this at home. So I really do hope that we can keep that, less polished, really a lot more approachable and realistic way to market things. It's been really for us too, with just showing what other people are doing with their flowers and letting you guys create the content.
And that was very much the founding theory of DREST, was to say there's always been a handful of people in fashion who have the point of view, who say what goes. And what we wanted to do with DREST was say, if we give you all the tools at your disposal virtually, the models, the hair by Sam McKnight, the supermodels, the locations, the clothes, what would you do? And we found that people are become so, it's almost, you talk here about a physical presence. We've had people saying, I feel like I'm touching that off-white handbag that's sitting behind me on my screen. And so I think that technology does have the ability to, if we're smart, to link the real and the virtual worlds. And that was very much the premise of DREST. One other point that I think is really, which I would dearly love to see happening in the future, is this sense of giving back being baked into business models. We're at startup stage, so we're not contributing a huge amount, but we have set up a business model with 5% of our revenues going back to causes that we think resonate with our consumers. We're working with all our talent in that way. And I really hope that specifically those bigger brands who are incredibly successful will really continue to do that, continue to give back, and still, and that there's a wonderful book actually called Who Cares, it's a play on the SAS title, it's called Who Cares Wins. And it's all about how, when you have good baked into the heart of your business, you're much more successful. So that for me is a big personal passion for me, and that was very important when we created the DREST business model. And I really hope the big brands who were so successful will continue with that as we move through these times.
I think the key thing that I'm picking up a lot, and not just in this conversation, but all the other conversations that I'm having in the industry and seeing what's going on, is this sense of, really, as you said, caring. It's about togetherness. It's about communities. It's about, what is of value? Like, what do you really passionate about? What do you care about? And it's imperative for every brand to not only state those values, but actually actively show that, and not just to their customers, but also internally. And this is the massive shift that I'm seeing, that you really have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. It's about really exemplifying that and showing that everywhere. And I think, this is amazing how, as a result, and I really do hope that this stays. I hope it's not just, passing, that we all forget about it in 6 months time, 12 months time, when, we are allowed to kind of go out there. Just to kind of change the topic slightly away from that, but recognizing that, the fact that, the digital space, there's only certain senses that you can, and Lucy, you were talking about that earlier in terms of, how do you create all the other 5 senses. And this actually was a question that came from somebody, I'm not sure he is Anthony Baglioli, and he was saying it's like, recognizing that digital in the virtual world can successfully address 2 of the 5 senses, sight and hearing. And he's asking, well, how can storytelling and digital bridge that gap in capturing the essence of the remaining 3, which is touch, smell, and taste, which is so key in the luxury and the fashion space. So how do you tackle that?
I have a thought on that. I just think that actually over the last few months, what has been so interesting is how technology has actually allowed us to experience the same thing at the same time, right? So, I've been dialing into the National Theatre's live YouTube streams of previous productions, but I've been doing that with my friends, and we've been having dinner, watching the same play together. I've had a brand that actually sent 20 of us sort of the same kind of pre-packed meal, and we sort of cooked it ourselves and then had a Zoom call together. It's in no way, will replicate ever the wonderful human touch of something physical. But there's really interesting ways. Netflix having allowed us now to watch film together in completely different geographies. And I think live streaming, what WeChat does so incredibly well around kind of social commerce, live stream shopping, I think that is something that's going to be very interesting around having shared experience, but in a very physically distant way. You know, we launched a streaming platform for independent cinema a few months ago called Tang TV, and that is purely at the moment streaming on your laptop or Chromecast on your TV. But what we're hoping to do, if we can, is to actually do drive-through cinemas where, though separated, we will be together. So I definitely think that there are ways of actually engaging all senses through individual physical spaces, but also communally, and really trying to use and create community around that.
Actually, on that point also, I've noticed that Secret Cinema has started, I think they call it the Secret Sofa. So they show a film and everyone has that kind of like communal experience. And then you can dress up, you can, you know, post photos of yourselves, so we can have that kind of communal experiences. And on your point about Netflix, I don't know if and it kind of takes away a little bit from the fashion side, but I don't know if you've seen the series Chernobyl. And I thought that they did a brilliant job of making you feel like you're being contaminated by what's happening. The sounds that they were using, the visuals, you can taste it, you can smell it, you're really in there. And I thought that was actually quite impressive to be able to have that feeling about it. But that's just kind of like my input.
It's a kind of sense of like when we think about the show calendar, you know, obviously that's all up in the air and it's of course going to completely change. But when I think of, you know, Corinne Rottfeld's, you know, Amphar show in Cannes, the fact that it suddenly became so much more democratic, I'm so excited about the idea that these experiences that were experienced by just a small few through live stream will suddenly be open up to much broader audience, which I think will just broaden our, you know, broaden those people, that audience of people who are interested in fashion and in all of our different sectors.
Yeah, I think the show's an interesting one for the future. I think definitely. Yeah. I mean, we know it needs to change, but I think if you talk to a lot of the creative directors, you know, and there's obviously been some great content out there and a lot of, you know, one-on-ones with a lot of the big creative directors, but you know, it's such an important part for them to create. I think it's more how it's then executed and in what formats, you know, because it is a different journey. You watch a creative director through a pre-collection, you watch them through, you know, a capsule or a drop, and then it gets to a show and it's a completely different process for them. You know, it's kind of, you know, it's an excitement, and it's not just in the production. I think it's just in the anticipation, the level of creativity. So I think that's a topic that everyone wants to say shows are not going to exist, they're not relevant, but you know, they're not going away. We've been saying this for 15, 20 years in fashion. No, I mean, at least 10, seriously. Everyone's like, okay, you know, fashion shows are a waste of money, they're exorbitant, they're not accessible, they're not inclusive. So I think the kind of the medium is becoming really important. But I think the principle, if you talk to any creative director that says, I really don't want to do a show, I think and we're diversifying a little bit, so forgive me, but I think, you know, what they do say is we put all this energy and creativity into something, and then it doesn't really sell because it's not commercial and it's not the right price point and it's a little bit trickier. So I think, you know, that's a whole conversation that kind of needs to evolve rather than sort of necessarily find a black and white solution to, because, you know, I think it is still an important part of our industry. And what's interesting from a consumer point of view is to say, you know, how important is it really for them? You know, it's kind of like we always talk about it from an industry point of view, and we know that only 400 to 1,000 people can actually attend a show. But, you know, to the consumer, how much excitement does it give them? What do they want to see in lieu of that? You know, is it enough to do amazing campaigns or like videos or YouTube or, you know? So I think it's a really, really interesting time to be having that kind of conversation on both sides, consumer side, industry side, and definitely from the creative side.
I think what's exciting is the convergence of different aspects. So, you know, it's already started happening, but in terms of, you know, marrying up the cinema, marrying up the music, marrying up the you know, the values, the ethics, the, you know, the essence of the brand, the brands themselves, the product, and how they, all of these kind of exist in one ecosystem.
I think that's been fantastic, bringing, like, you know, everyone talks about fashion, music, travel. I mean, obviously not an easy subject right now, but, you know, kind of food and how many synergies they are. And I think that's been one thing that's great for this kind of period, is you've got brands that, you know, that they're collaborating with chefs, or, you know, they're collaborating with musicians, and they're kind of bringing this whole sort of, you know, kind of world into something very, very, you know, through very kind of tangible medium that everyone can engage in. And I think that that's been great, because, you know, I think we know honestly that our customer doesn't want to sit for 12 weeks and just hear about fashion from us, you know. So I think that diversity has been really, really interesting. And I think, you know, some brands have done it, you know, really, really well.
And what kind of other marketing experiments or something that's really creative that's happening, what stood out to you? Anything that's out there that, you know, some more kind of experiential marketing, or doing something different, or kind of...
I saw a lot more TikTok videos from crazy people, which really made me laugh. I don't know how much that's going to convert into product, but I definitely sort of saw, you know, some very creative people that are usually very serious and very kind of, you know, from actresses to chefs. I kind of loved it. I don't know if you saw it with, I think it was with Judi Dench, and she learned TikTok with her nephew and kind of like videoed it live. And it was just, you know, I think the element of kind of uplifting was great. So I kind of took quite a lot of pleasure in seeing some people, you know, get involved in some crazy TikTok action. I'm not saying it's got longevity, but it was a nice welcome change.
Like light-hearted. And any other channels?
I've enjoyed the gaming. I'm obviously probably looking at the gaming sector a little bit more than most, but like Travis Scott performing in Fortnite, or I loved seeing Glossier kind of relaunching their pink hoodie in Animal Crossing. I've sort of enjoyed those kind of elements as well. I thought there's a lot of potential there.
And Caroline, any kind of interesting things that you're seeing?
I mean, like Sarah, I've sort of delved back into TikTok, but I'm delving right back out. It's just not a platform that I completely ascribe to. But I just think that what was just fascinating on my own account was just seeing how many Instagram live conversations, that kind of feeling of connection that people have been wanting, and just, you know, sometimes it works really well and sometimes it's completely backfired for brands. And I think, but again, I think this is a great time to experiment across so many different platforms and ways of communicating. So, you know, what I think I've been most impressed with, I think, is just how fast people have galvanized, pivoted, come together. I think the Emergency Designer Network here in England, with, you know, starting with Bethany Williams and Holly Fulton, just having these young designers galvanize bigger brands like John Smedley and Burberry to kind of pivot their factories to create PPE. Things like that have been so amazing to see, kind of communities coming together, our industry coming together very quickly to do, you know, incredibly important work that isn't directly going to go commercially to the bottom line, but I think everybody will remember long term. So I think that's been quite amazing to see.
And any other channels apart from TikTok that you've seen that are kind of coming out, or anything new that we should be paying attention to, or should we all be on Instagram Live?
I mean, I really have appreciated the new informality of a lot of the content. You know, I mean, we're all quite nicely dressed today, but I've been on calls with kind of Chanel HQ in New York, but it's like a global marketing director who's in a kind of, you know, like wife beater tank top in her very hot apartment. And I've sort of enjoyed seeing that in our business, you know, business to business communications. But I've also enjoyed it, you know, I've looked at someone like Mary Greenwell, who's doing all the makeup for DREST, and she'd never done an Instagram Live. She comes on and she's so honest and she's so candid, and she starts with no makeup, and it's so open. And I think some of those trends, again, were already happening in beauty, but I love seeing some of, you know, that democratization, that informality. And I think, to Sarah's point, it makes it a more level playing field for the larger brands with a lot of money and the smaller brands. So that new sense of new informality is also exciting to me.
I think for me, if you're not on WeChat, you're missing like an incredible view into our future. I think WeChat is just an incredible platform. And I'm just surprised that we here in Europe and in the West have not yet managed to create an infrastructure like that. And the way, you know, I spend way too much time looking at live stream selling channels that are so informal, Lucy, your eyes would be a little, you would be very surprised. But it's just fascinating. And for me, I think everybody needs to be on WeChat. It's a bit complicated, but it's very, very fascinating.
But it's such an integral part of their life in Asia, though, isn't it? I mean, they do everything on WeChat. It's incredible. Yeah. You know, it's a huge platform.
Yeah.
And Whitney, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Like good old fashioned Instagram. And I mean, Instagram and Facebook digital marketing ads work really well for us. Yeah, so that and like old fashioned newsletters. I mean, we have a WhatsApp chat group that's like a spike, and every time we send one, it's like we have a huge spike in sales. I think the product though, it goes back so much to the product, and inherently we have a product that dies, you know, after 9 days, because so there is like a constant, you don't need to buy a new swimsuit every 9 days, but there's something about flowers, you know, like food, and the seasonality means that you have newness every week and it's genuinely new. So luckily our product does lend itself well to that sort of marketing.
One question I wanted to ask all of you is, and this is a lot for the audience that's here, it's like, what should CMOs focus on in 2020? What are your main thoughts on that? Can I pick on Sarah?
I mean, I think it's partly what we've touched on. For me, it's going to be very interesting to see the next kind of 6 months going into 2021. I mean, I think we know that this is not going anywhere. And I think, you know, we've all been locked down enough for it to have, you know, kind of a real impact, I think, going forward. This is not just a whim. We've taken 4 weeks off and we're all back at it. So I think, I'm hoping, like, you know, the transparency will continue. I think we were on that track anyway. And I think it's just fast track that, you know, communication and engaging, creativity, and the continuation of that kind of that level playing field of really sort of, you know, smaller brands being able to create. And also I think hopefully it's given them the confidence to continue on that path, because there is a kind of, you know, there's a lot of FOMO in the world, and I think there also is, particularly in fashion. You know, everyone looks around and, you know, seeing what everyone's doing or what channels they're using, and I think hopefully this has given people the time, you know, to kind of, you know, as Lucy said, in a way it's probably, I mean, it's kind of looking at your business, it might not feel like it, but it's probably given you so much invaluable data this period that will make your launch even stronger, you know, in June or July, because you've got this highly engaged customer that you've been able to learn from in a really kind of intense sort of period. So I think, you know, really using it. I think the interesting thing as well is, you know, it's digital is very tangible. We can look at, you know, we can track the user's journey, we can look at how engaged they are, etc. But what we don't know is all of this community in this building. Ultimately, everyone is a business. Ultimately, everyone has to sell product. No, I mean, it's, you know, this has been very strong at community. Everyone is in a difficult financial situation, whether you're big or whether you're small, everyone is suffering. That's also leveled the playing field. You know, the big brands, the small brands alike. The difference with the small, some won't survive. So I think, you know, there's got to be now a reality of, you know, that conversion and what that looks like, you know, going forward into when people are going to start buying product. And as Whitney said, you know, she has a product that people want right now. There's going to probably be a big rethink for all of us, what we spend, how much we spend on fashion, where we spend it. But I think, you know, the reality of return on investment, you know, will have to come back into play, because, you know, it's still content we have to create. It's still budgets. You know, if you want to do Instagram ads, you still have to find a budget to be able to do them. So I think for over the next 6 months, that's the balance that we've got to find. We've got to really, like, you know, every brand's got to look and be like, okay, hopefully this has built community, it's built brand loyalty, but how do we then take that forward in terms of conversion and, you know, really, really driving the business side as well.
And Caroline?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think if I think about both as a publisher, but also as a consumer, I think it's about, I take Sarah's point, and absolutely we all have to sell things, and there's a lot of stuff in this world, right? So I think it's about beyond selling products now as CMOs, and it's about brands kind of just really explaining why I should care as a consumer to buy your dress, your flowers, your magazine over a lot of other ones that are there. So I think it's about brands explaining how they add value, how they're being part of today, the relevant topics of today, and how they're being part of the change. And also just, you know, I think none of us have talked about, you know, climate change and environmental issues, and how we all need to be very relevant, how like creativity without accountability today just is no longer possible. So I think, you know, tell me why I should care about your product versus everybody else. And as long as you're making beautiful product, I will be even more loyal to you today.
Yeah, I agree.
And Lucy, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with Sarah and Caroline. I think in the short term, for me, it's about initiatives, not campaigns, actions, not advertising. And I think it's kind of stop and think moments, gestures of support. But I think we have to use this time really strategically to get closer to our customers, to listen to them, to answer a lot of the questions that Caroline said. You know, why should I care about this brand? What does it deliver me of practical value, of emotional value? You know, how does it add value to my life, and how does it resonate with my values? So I think this is the time to, you know, all of our products are born out of a need state in the market. So I think we just have to really get close to what the market need state is, and either adjust our product or our strategy about our storytelling around the product, so that we're really in sync with our customers, because people have had a lot of time to think in lockdown. Some people have given up careers, have changed jobs, have lost jobs. People are thinking about the value of life, and I think we have to see how our proposition fits into their life. How does it make them feel joyful, feel happy that they have flowers? Love Caroline's new issue of Tank. You know, all those kind of elements. I think we have to think it's a more sophisticated form of marketing than it has been, I think, previously. More emotional marketing. Yeah.
And Whitney?
God, I really can't add to that. I mean, for me, Caroline really summed it up, and what Lucy said too. It's like, you need to have purpose, you need to have relevance, you know, and the relevance is going to be different. We're all going to consume fashion, but are we going to consume fashion in a more meaningful way? I hope so. Is it going to be less ostentatious fashion? Probably. So I think, you know, my husband's a fashion designer. He's a menswear designer. So I think people are still going to want luxury and beauty and quality. It's just, I think it's important that we have a sensitivity to what people want and need. That, you know, that old Winston Churchill quote, that's don't let a good crisis go to waste. So it's like, how to find, you know, people are having now, the number of people that have emailed me and said, oh, dinner for 6 in the garden, you know, so there's like a new opportunity of dining at home that people need flowers for. We've just signed with Co-op Funeral Care, which is so depressing and horrible, but these people were sending people off and saying goodbye to loved ones without flowers because they couldn't buy flowers. So there is a need for what we're all doing. It's finding that relevance and how we're going to be relevant and stay relevant in a new world. And maybe it's not, you know, for Vuitton, a floral chandelier down the Palace of Versailles. You know, maybe it's letting people more democratically, back to Lucy's point, sending people off with flowers. And whether that's a 40-pound bunch of flowers that means you can say goodbye to someone you love, you know, with beauty, that's more relevant and more important now than ever. So I think it's looking and understanding what, and we're all sensitive and emotionally sort of open people. So it's understanding what people need and then, you know, catering to that. And that's why we all started our businesses and what we all are good at. I'm going to
in the first place.
In the first place. So it's just staying open and having those emotional receptors open and you know, because back to what Lucy said, she hasn't launched yet. So it's a lot easier for us to pivot because we're smaller and just be open to where the opportunity is now, because it's a completely different landscape.
No, that's it's excellent advice. And I think, you know, what really comes strongly is, you know, who are you as a business, and how do you, either uplift or, help or, kind of emotionally engage with your customer. And I think communicating that and understanding that as well is really, really key. I know I'm conscious of time, that sometimes, some people have factored in an hour rather than an hour and a half. So what I wanted to do is to do a quick poll before we take some questions from the audience. And we have about 5 questions, which I will do that now. So for the audience, I'm gonna just start that. So we've got questions. Is your business communicating more or less right now? And the second question is, have you increased or reduced your marketing budget since lockdown? The third question, what engagement tools have been most successful for your brand during lockdown? And then we've got question number 4, what is your number 1 marketing priority right now? And yes, so if everyone can start answering those questions, that would be fantastic. So we'll just let that run for a little bit of time. So what I'd like to do when everyone's finished doing this is just to take some questions from the audience. So we've got a few questions that have come up here, and maybe whilst people are answering, we've got an anonymous question. How to effectively communicate online for a luxury events agency that started a few months ago, having little content. So I don't know if you have any advice for that.
I mean, my piece of advice is like, explain what you stand for as a luxury events organization. What kind of brands are you hoping to work with? What are the brand values of your business? Why did you start it up? What is different about it to others? And share your taste, curate other Instagram accounts, bring in other people so that we can understand your world. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. And so I'm just letting that run for just a little bit longer so people are kind of answering. If you have any questions that you want to ask the audience as well, this is a moment to submit your question and I can bring you into the conversation. So please do submit your questions. So we've got Marika Dixon. Can I invite you? So I'm going to make you a panelist, Marika, and you had a question. So I'm not sure if you're ready for it, but let's see if she can join us here. So yes, if you can unmute yourself and state where you are from and what your question is.
Okay, so I am in Washington, D.C. I work at Christian Dior, and we know that almost 50% of our clients locally and internationally are Chinese, and of course use WeChat, but I'm not familiar with it. I don't really know where I would start. So can maybe just an idea of, I can download the app, but it's such a massive platform. What would you advise as maybe a road in?
I mean, I'll take that since I'm a daily WeChat user. I mean, download it. You're going to have to know somebody else who can verify you who's on WeChat. Maybe that's a customer of yours who you're friendly with. And then it essentially has what every other platform does. There's a personal chat function. There's like a Facebook section is where you can post your own moments. But for me, the most interesting thing is within the WeChat Pay, as Sarah mentioned. It's a completely interconnected system. So you buy on WeChat when you're in China. You can pay your rent, your energy bills, etc. But the most important and interesting place that I sort of spend time on is an area around fashion shopping. And that's a subsection of that is live stream, where there are thousands and thousands of KOLs, key opinion leaders, who go into these small studios and show product live, and because of the infrastructure of the platform, you can actually buy them immediately as they show up next to you. So imagine like Whitney with her amazing peonies sitting in her beautiful background, you know, showing you that, and you could literally just click one button and you could get it delivered to your door, and they do that 24 hours. That's a really fascinating place, but otherwise it's a great place, just like WhatsApp, to message with friends who are also on there. And if your Chinese clients are using WeChat, it's a great way to sort of also sort of share that platform with them and sort of be on their native platform. But it is a little bit tricky because it's not in English. You can figure it out just through a little bit of discovery.
If you go to China, you can't actually survive without it.
No.
You can't even buy coffee without it.
Pretty much, yeah. But it gets more intuitive and you know, it's relatively easy to use. So download it, find somebody who can verify you, who's also on WeChat, and then it's pretty, you know, I mean, even the mini programs, what brands can do with mini programs, which is like moving image, stills, the commerce, it's pretty incredible what they do. And also, you know, hire a good Chinese assistant.
Thank you. We've got Roxana Larizade here as well, so I'm just going to bring her onto the panel. And Marika, thank you very much for your question. So Roxana, would you introduce yourself and make sure that we can see you and you're not on mute, and what your question is?
Hi, yes, thanks, Maria. Hi, I'm Roxana Larizade. I work for Starcom at Publicis Media, and I oversee commerce projects for UK and global clients. I do have an MBA in luxury brand management, and I'm very passionate about the industry. So here I am with a question that I've been thinking about for a while. So, you know, as we are in this situation now with the pandemic, clearly, you know, there's a recession starting, and, you know, obviously consumers are starting to think about what's more necessary, what's not, you know, necessary purchase. You look at, you know, retailers and brands, brick and mortar struggling more and more, e-commerce on the rise, but, you know, obviously not enough to take over from, you know, usual brick and mortar sales. What do you think brands will be having to do, you know, as we move forward? Do you think that some big box brands might close some stores, keep a few for visibility purposes? Do you think that there could be a rise in personal shopping, you know, personal shopper services where, you know, consumers may be talking to their sales assistants via WeChat, via WhatsApp, instead of coming in the store? Where do you see this trend going? And do you think that this will be more of the new normal if we think that, you know, it'll be a little bit more difficult to try things on in store given this virus?
I'd
like to answer. Sorry, Lucy. I mean, I think on the stores, I think a lot of brands are rationalizing the number of stores they have. You know, I think the store expansion over the last 5 years has been quite rapid. I think we know that digital is never going to fully replace bricks and mortar stores, but I think there is going to be a reset, and a lot of brands already are saying, okay, how many stores do we need? What are our key stores? I think the size of stores is going to change. You know, the scale, real estate is changing a lot already. It was already starting to. I'm sure you're aware that real estate, you know, has been very expensive. It's been incredibly expensive to get in. So I think there's going to be a huge reset on real estate. So I think a rationalization of bricks and mortar stores, how they function. I think WeChat, WhatsApp has been functioning for sales associates for a very, very long time now. I think if you think for any of us who are kind of like remotely shopping in bricks and mortar stores, it is by WhatsApp. You know, it's like, we've just got these in, send you a picture, you probably don't even go to the store. So it kind of has put into question, if you do have real estate and prime real estate, how big a space do you need? And then what do you want to communicate through it? Maybe it becomes more of an experience space rather than just, you know, kind of here's some product, come in and buy it. So I think the experience hopefully will start translating into bricks and mortar as well, because it will make that a more kind of a compelling reason to actually physically go into a store. And clearly what we've seen during the last 12 weeks is the massive reliance on digital. People are set up and already have a very strong digital business with a relevant product. Great. For those that weren't, obviously have suffered a little bit more. But I think, to answer your question, for sure, big brands are rationalizing their stores. They're looking at closing some stores and really rethinking, it's going back to what we said before. What is the real need for our customer? We have to look at it across the board, not just in messaging, marketing, but where do they want to shop? If they come into bricks and mortar, what is going to drive them into that store? There's some great examples. Loewe, their new store they opened in London, it's more of a texture, it's more of an experience, it incorporates art. You look at Chanel, their sofa is made out of a beautiful Chanel tweed. It's an experience of the brand. So I think the stores that don't give that are just selling product, are going to suffer more. The ones that, create an experience in the store, I think will really benefit. Sorry, Lucy.
Can I just adding to that, we've actually had over the past, I would say 5 to 6 weeks, a huge number of brands, both big and small, reaching out to us to see if that virtual try-on experience, which is part of gameplay in DREST, can be replicated. Either initially we were thinking of white labels sitting outside, allowing people the technology, because the one thing, one of the ideas for DREST was that ability to try multiple things on at one time, see what goes with what. I obviously prior to this was at Net-a-Porter, and we could maybe show an outfit 1 or 2 ways. And so one of the big advantages of the wardrobe functionality within DREST is that people can try on full looks. So we've actually been talking a lot to brands about their plans going forward. And as Sarah said, they're having to rethink the shop experience. It has, shopping used to be this great pleasure. Now the idea of going to a shop and queuing and social distances doesn't feel like a luxury experience. So we're actually working with a few brands on creating their entire stock within DREST, and allowing them to come in, either to give it to their personal shoppers to create looks. We already actually have a number of stylists who've started using DREST as a personal shopping tool to create looks for their clients, rather than sending them a picture on WhatsApp. The idea of actually being able to show people that Gucci skirt looks fantastic with a denim jacket as much as it does with an Saint Laurent tux, all those kind of elements. So I think that sense of harnessing the technology for that is so exciting. We're also developing the ability for 2 people to style at once. So you could have a personal shopper, in the wardrobe at the same time as their client. So there's so much that we can do with technology. I don't think, Sarah said there are going to be these small intimate moments, but I do think that technology can really, really bridge a lot of the gap and make that luxury shopping experience better. And the idea of being able to style anything with anything is so exciting, and being able to do that virtually, but then having a real life outcome from that virtual experience is really exciting. So that's actually been, even though we're still in soft launch at this moment, that's been one of the elements of our kind of mini pivot at this moment, of making sure that we are prioritizing that ability for people to for brands to come and interact directly with customers and style them virtually.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to have one more question, but I think it's really running very, very close to people having to get back to their normal working day. But I thought I would share the answers of the poll that we've just done. So is your brand communicating more or less right now? 73% say more, which is quite telling. The second question, which is, have you increased or reduced your marketing budget since lockdown? And it's reduced, 44% saying that, 34% are saying it's kept the same. The engagement tools that have been most successful, Instagram at 44%, and email newsletters are a second at 24%. And the number 1 marketing priority has been engagement, so that's quite high. And is your company experimenting with experiential marketing? 49% saying not sure. So that's something, it's still relatively new for them. And the last question, which is, should brands address social and political issues in their marketing? The answer is split. And yes, predominantly, people say, but also it depends. So yes, so I thought that was interesting to share our audience's insights. And thank you very much for doing that. And, I would love to take more questions, and appreciate that we all, have time constraints, and our panelists are super wonderful, amazing, have so many interesting insights to share, and each individually has, you know, a business that they're running, you know, very successfully with the challenges and having to adjust in this very strange environment with new social issues and, you know, human problems that are arising on every day, and how we, as, you know, people in the fashion business, how do we adjust to that? Because ultimately, you know, clothing, fashion, it's not just, you know, frills and, you know, making you feel amazing, but also, you know, it's an expression. It's something that does have a purpose. I don't think it's as frivolous as, you know, as it first comes across. It's something that is so key to us as humans, to be able to, you know, show who we are, the personalities, but also ways of connecting with each other, you know, forming tribes, and, you know, point that brings us together. And I think that's really essential. And, you know, with bringing a panel with female leaders, what I wanted to do is not only give a platform for sharing those ideas, but also, you know, show that human element and how women are making such a huge difference in the current situation, and that we all need more female leaders. We all need more diverse leaders. I mean, obviously this panel was designed for that, but, you know, diversity, different opinions, you know, I'd love to have more people from different countries, different cultures. And I think as businesses, we and countries and communities, we all need more of that. And I really appreciate you all coming today, both our wonderful panelists and our audience, which has been sent so many questions. I can literally not able to deal with all of those, but I do hope we can continue doing these, and you've been very helpful in helping us to create new topics and you know, things that are important to you, and, you know, help with suggestions for panelists. So please do continue to do that. But again, Caroline and Sarah and Whitney and Lucy, thank you so much for joining us here and, you know, telling your stories. And I really wish all the success to your businesses. And as a fashion community, you know, it's really, the work that you're doing is really important. So thank you, and looking forward to seeing you all one day in real life, and, you know, share stories and laugh about this, and change the world. So I really hope that happens too. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all, guys.
Good
Yeah,
to see
great.
you.
Bye.
Bye.